Welcome to her remarkable history. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The women that executed Anne Boleyn. One of England's most brutal and shocking executions was Anne Boleyn's. Henry VIII's second wife was brought out to Tower Green on the 19th of May 1536. She was led out to a scaffold on Tower Green, and there to greet her was a French swordsman who was brought over to take her life. She made a short speech to the crowd, before in one swift strike her head was taken from her body. The execution of Anne is considered one of English history's great injustices, with Thomas Cromwell tasked of weaving an intricate web of lies and spin against her to ensure the king had grounds for a divorce or annulment from her. However, in letters and statements from around the time, two women were implicated in the plot to oust Anne Boleyn from power. In a letter from John Hughes, a London merchant, to Lady Lisle, he mentioned briefly the execution of Anne Boleyn that had taken place. Specifically, what he mentioned was the first accuser, the Lady Worcester, and Nan Coburn, with one maid Mo. But the Lady Worcester was the first ground. With this, the merchant is implying that Lady Worcester, Nan Coburn, and one maid gave testimony against Anne Boleyn that resulted in the execution of Anne. Hussa is regarded as a reliable source, as he was linked to the court of King Henry VIII, and he was a messenger carrying correspondence from England to France at times. He's a man who later, during Henry's reign, spent 2 years inside the Tower of London, accused of corresponding with Cardinal Reginald Pole. However, who are the women that he is writing about, having given evidence against Anne Boleyn that led to her death? First of all, the charges Anne Boleyn were accused of were adultery, treason and incest, all of which were very shocking and serious at the time. The women who testified against Anne would have conveyed information regarding these charges, and it's likely that Cromwell, the mastermind behind the whole scheme, cherry-picked them for their testimony that would secure a guilty verdict. In fact, the council appointed already had predetermined the outcome of the trial, as the men accused of the crimes, with her except her brother, had already been sentenced to death. But who are the three, Lady Worcester, Nan Coburn, and the maid that are mentioned as being the key witnesses to testify against Queen Anne Boleyn? Lady Worcester is believed refers to Elizabeth Brown. She came from nobility, and through her family had links to royalty. She was the second wife to Henry Somerset, the second Earl of Worcester, and she was deemed, through this, the Countess of Worcester. Now Elizabeth was part of Anne's close group of ladies, her ladies-in-waiting who attended on her. She was prominent inside her privy chamber, and was close with the Queen. Following her coronation, she stood close to the Queen during a large feast thrown in her honour. She was so close to Anne, she was tasked with wiping her face during meals and providing a napkin for her to spit food into that she did not agree with. Elizabeth even borrowed money from Anne, and she had not repaid this by the time she was taken inside the Tower of London. There were payments also made from the king's personal treasury to the Countess of Worcester, probably because of Anne's organising. The close relationship she had to the Queen led to Cromwell believing she would be a great witness to uphold the accusations made against her, as it's obvious that she would have been aware in any adulterous or treasonous acts because of her closeness. It's believed she could have also been complicit. In 1536, she did testify against her former Lady Anne, saying she had in fact engaged in a number of adulterous affairs with a handful of men, confirming the names Henry Norris, Mark Smeaton, and most shockingly of all, her brother George. Her accusation stated, the sister of one of the most straight-laced of the king's counsellors, whom he observes engaging in adulterous behaviour. Once her brother warns her against appearing promiscuous, the sister of the counsellor announced she is not the worst sinner in regards to promiscuous behaviour, but you see a small fault in me, Weyler overlooking a much higher fault that is damaging. With this she accused Anne and her brother George in committing incest, saying that often her brother had carnal knowledge of her in bed. This accusation was incredibly shocking, and although many historians regard the charges of incest between the siblings as false and nothing more than slander, it's clear that Elizabeth was willing to sharply break her friendship, loyalty and bond with Anne Boleyn. Why she chose to do this remains debatable. It's possible she could have been given some financial incentive to do so by Cromwell, or that she was promised to be feathered at court herself, suiting her own ambitions. But during these testimonies she was pregnant, and even Anne Boleyn was concerned about her former lady-in-waiting's pregnancy and her difficulty, and expressed her concern while she was inside the tower locked up. She said she much lamented my Lady of Worcester, because that her child did not stir in her body. But the following year she gave birth to a daughter named Anne, possibly in honour of Anne Boleyn, the woman she was fond of but crossed with devastating effect. The next lady mentioned, who testified against the Queen, is much more troubling to identify. Referred to as Nan Cobham, the most possible person this could be is Anne Brooke, the Countess of Cobham. Some historians think the Countess was Anne's midwife. However, it's accepted that she was a member of the Queen's household. She was married to George Brooke, the 9th Baron Cobham, and received a letter in 1533, or more of a summons, inviting her to attend the coronation of Queen Anne Boleyn. She accepted the role of the Queen's horsewoman during the procession from the Tower of London to Westminster Abbey, and she wore ornate and beautiful clothing. Her husband was a distant cousin of the Queen, but he went on to be one of the 27 who presided over Anne Boleyn's trial, ultimately condemning her to death. Historical documents state that she was close to the King's court, as she received a gift from King Henry VIII on New Year's 1534, and this proves that she was a member of the Queen's household and the royal court. This also makes her a prime target for Cromwell to use her to get what he wished with regards to Anne Boleyn's execution. Because of this, she, as mentioned earlier, could have also been bribed with financial gain or power to ensure she testified against Anne. Interestingly though, Anne rarely went by the title of Cobham and preferred to be known as Anne Bray. But why is she referred to as Nan Cobham is slightly strange. It's believed that the Nan part of this could have related to the rumour regarding her being a midwife, rather than the modern-day use of the word Nan to have been a grandparent or elderly lady. It's also unclear why she turned against her former lady, but for Cromwell both her and Lady Worcester helped to put the nail in Anne Boleyn's coffin. But there was also one other woman named in the letter, one other woman who testified, someone referred to as one Maid Mo. This is most commonly believed to have been Margaret Horseman, who later became Lady Lister. It's believed she was a maid of honour to all of Henry VIII's first 3 queens, and was present in the household of the last 3. She was also described as the Queen's wardrobe with regards to Anne Boleyn, meaning that she was certainly a member of the Queen's inner chamber and the Privy Chamber. This suggests that she was very close to the king, and shockingly it's also been stated that she may have been with Anne Boleyn while she was inside the Tower of London. It's clear that she was close to the monarchy, especially the Queen's. It's claimed in some accounts that she remained loyal to Anne, but others say she was used as a witness against her. She was so close to Anne that she knew her favourite dog, and she accompanied her on royal visits. What is strange when considering Margaret Horseman's role in the execution of Anne Boleyn is that she remained close to the monarchy even after Anne's death, and also served as a lady inside the household and court of the rest of Henry's queens. It could be considered that maybe testifying against Anne guaranteed her a place rubbing shoulders with Henry VIII and his future wives for life, and this is possibly why she may have done this, if she did at all. All 3 of the women named in the letter share one thing in common. They were intimate and close members of Anne Boleyn's ladies, making them the perfect witnesses. They would have had quiet conversations with the Queen on a daily basis, and it's likely that she shared information regarding her personal life with these women. They made the perfect targets for Thomas Cromwell to manipulate them, and to secure the death and execution of Anne. The court, based on the testimonies of the women and other evidence gathered, took little time to sentence Anne to death, and she was then executed with one single stroke of a sword. Cromwell himself witnessed the execution, overseeing the final act in the plot that he had organised. Whilst Anne Boleyn's marriage to the king caused great turmoil with regards to religion across the country, her execution still came at a remarkable shock to the people of Tudor England. Queens and kings were regarded as people sent from God to rule, and for one to be executed in bloody fashion shows the power that Henry VIII and Cromwell wielded. The 3 women mentioned in the letter, it's believed, helped to provide the evidence that was needed to secure her death, and with this they can be believed to have been the women who sentenced Anne to death and guaranteed her execution. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.